Sam Amick mentions that the Timberwolves and the Sacramento Kings could be interested if Ja Morant trade market does develop. We're going to talk a little bit about what those trades could look like. Plus, the Jazz lose Walker Kessler for the rest of the season, and it's probably time to admit Joel Embiid is cooked. We're going to talk about all these things and more on today's NBA Central.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything NBA related and basketball related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into the content for today, y'all. So Sam Amick said this: as for where this is all headed, it's worth remembering that Morant is still just 26 years old. His baggage has been well chronicled, but there are still no shortage of teams that will continue monitoring his situation. The Minnesota Timberwolves, per team source, are one. Ditto for the Sacramento Kings. The Grizzlies' next opponent, the Houston Rockets, need a point guard after losing Fred VanVleet to a torn ACL, but a per team source are unlikely to pursue him. That's just a small sample size of what might be out there and not out there if Morant sweepstakes ever actually begin. Now, we know that with all the drama around Ja Morant recently, and him being discontent with the Grizzlies, the recent suspension, the fact that they went to a system that has forced the ball out of his hands, all the things we talked about on yesterday's episode, that he's not necessarily happy in Memphis. And him asking about his joy being in Memphis and him basically answering that no, it leads some credence to that thing. And so naturally, trade speculation is going to start based off this. But if Sam Amick is to be believed, and the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Sacramento Kings are two teams that are watching to see his availability, which team would make the most sense there? Right now, you look, of course, first at the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I think they're just further along in making a trade for somebody like Ja Morant and to pair him with Anthony Edwards and whoever they're able to keep down there would potentially propel them into actually being a championship contender. Now, the Minnesota Timberwolves have been in the Western Conference Finals the last 2 years. They probably should be talked about as a contender anyway. But when you look at Ja Morant in his $39 million contract this season, $42 million next season, and the $44 million the last year of that, what could the Minnesota Timberwolves put on the board to try to get Ja Morant there, right? So right off the top, you have Rudy Gobert's at $35 million. Julius Randle's at $30 million. You got Jaden Daniels at $24 million. Naz Reid at $21 million. And that's their biggest, largest contracts, right? So with a combination of maybe somebody like Jaden McDaniels and Dante DiVincenzo get it done. Now, that's not necessarily anything that's going to propel the Grizzlies to stay exactly where they are. But then you have to look at the draft capital on top of this as well. The Timberwolves have their own first-round pick in 2026 that they can't trade right now because they don't have their own pick in 2027. They actually have Utah's pick then. They have their own pick in 2029, but they can't trade that one either because they have a protected pick in 2030 that is also protected to the Utah Jazz. So the Minnesota Timberwolves don't have a lot of picks to be able to throw out there, right? The trade that they got Rudy Gobert has left some of their draft capital. So they have picks that are frozen in that case that they can't necessarily move. And so that was what makes it a little bit more difficult, right? Now, if the Grizzlies are going to go, or will they go completely tear down in that case? That's what we don't know. But you would think that, somebody in that combination has to be on the move there. Do they look at Naz Reid and that pairing with Jaden Daniels is something that they can do that's more maybe fruitious than with Zach Edey? I don't know, right? But the thing is that the Timberwolves do have contracts. They also have young players. Now, one player that I didn't mention that is Rob Dillingham. I would think that Rob Dillingham is a no doubt has to go in any trade for Ja Morant if the Minnesota Timberwolves wanted to get Ja Morant there. So if you're looking at Rob Dillingham at 21 years old, being kind of the centerpiece around that deal, especially because the Timberwolves don't have a lot of picks that they can throw in there, that's a $6.5 million contract. You still got to find 33 extra million to include in that deal, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky at when it comes down to it, right? So not to say that it can't get done. I'm sure that it could get done if it is like if Ja goes and depending on if they go off what he says and what his desire is, but I'm sure the Minnesota Timberwolves can put an interesting package together in that case. Then you turn around and you look at the other team that's mentioned, and that's the Sacramento Kings in this case, right? And the Kings are a team that is listen, I don't think that a trade for Ja Morant makes a lot of sense for them. Yes, they have Zach LaVine, who they're trying to move. I don't see Memphis being interested in that. They have DeMar DeRozan. I don't see them being interested in that. Malik Monk could be included in the deal, but definitely is not going to be the centerpiece of the deal. The benefit that the Kings do have that a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves don't is that the Kings own all their first-round picks. They own their own pick in 2026. They own their pick and the Spurs pick, or and OKC pick, I think, in 2027. They own their own pick in 28, 29, 30, right? So they have a number of their own picks that they can include in that trade to try to get that done, and that is what maybe adds the separation there. But if they get a player like Ja Morant, how valuable are those picks going to be, especially if you are able to keep Domantas Sabonis there and pair Sabonis with Ja Morant, with having Keegan Murray still there as well. That remains to be seen. But these are two teams that we could be interested. We know that the Kings were interested. Hell, they were looking at trading for Jonathan Kuminga. So them being interested and looking out for a move shouldn't be too much of a shock there. It makes a lot of sense for them. It just comes down to that those two teams are cool. But make no mistake about it, if the Grizzlies make Ja Morant fully available and just say, listen, we're starting a bidding war, everybody bring your best offers to the table, there are going to be a number of teams. I would think that no less than 18 to 20 teams around the NBA are probably going to take a look at bringing Ja Morant in there. We know that Ja Morant has had his own issues and things like that, but he's still a very talented player. And I think if you can get him in a situation, especially if you have a culture and maybe a head coach that you think can connect with Ja, maybe you feel like, hey, there's more than enough talent here, and we feel like we can, fix some of the outside of basketball things that are going on to make this a good situation. And maybe that's the case. So, we'll see. But overall, I'll say this. I don't expect anything to come at this year. If it does happen, I think you're looking at it being a result of whatever happens during the season. And maybe it happens next year in the offseason. We have a lot of teams with cap space. You have the draft picks where teams, once you know where these teams' draft picks sit in a deep draft, maybe that can entice the Memphis Grizzlies a little bit more. But this is something to look out for. Now, in this, it was mentioned that the Houston Rockets are not a team that would be interested in it. I think that goes back to the Rockets not wanting to add big-time salary to what they already have going on there. They're very conscious of that second tax apron looming for them, as they have players that they're going to need to extend sooner rather than later. But I think we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. And if, the Ja Morant and Memphis Grizzlies thing ends up ending in divorce, let me know what you guys think on that down below. Next topic. Walker Kessler season just came to an end as he is going to be having shoulder surgery on his labrum there. That's going to leave him out the rest of the season. Now, Walker Kessler is an interesting name because him and the Jazz did not reach an agreement on a new contract before the extension date, which means he's going to be a restricted free agent anyway. There have been some talk they could possibly look to move him. That now probably takes this off the board. It's going to make his restricted free agency even more interesting now that that Walker Kessler, his season's ending. For what it's worth, Kessler on the season, 14.4 points per game, 10 rebounds, 3 assists. We know what Walker Kessler does block-wise. He was averaging almost 2 blocks per game, which is actually 1.8, the lowest of his NBA career, but averaging 1.4 steals per game as well. This is a guy that absolutely is a stud. And, he even added the three-pointer this year, taking, just 1.5 three-pointers per game, but hitting at a 75% clip. That's more than what he did at any other point of his NBA career so far. And it was just 5 games. Now, the question becomes, what does this mean for Walker Kessler and the upcoming restricted free agency? Does this make it more difficult, or does it make it easier for teams to negotiate? The Jazz being a team that reportedly at one point wanted 2 first-round picks back for Kessler if they were to trade him. I think that's now going to be off the board for sure. And so this just makes the future of him and with the Utah Jazz that much more interesting on what's going to end up shaking out here, right? But he suffered this injury on Halloween against the Phoenix Suns. He played 29 minutes in that game, grabbed 13 rebounds. We know what Walker Kessler is in the NBA. He's a true big that can rebound, protect the rim, is really good in pick and roll offense, okay in pick and roll defense as well. And he's just that guy that can really truly be an anchor of your defense. I've seen some people to say that like Walker Kessler is a bit overrated. I don't personally believe and buy into that, but I understand that that's the place that some people are with Walker Kessler. I just think that now it just makes this interesting. And Walker Kessler is still a guy. Now, this injury, I want to be clear here, this is the type of injury you're going to have 100% usually rate of returning right back to your 100% self. It's just that the surgery is going to leave you out for the rest of the year. It's not really usually with this type of injury anything that lingers on or turns it into anything that you got to worry about for a career or anything like that. But it's just now interesting to see how this is going to affect the restricted free agency for Walker Kessler. But let me know what you guys think on that down below. Hearing that Walker Kessler season is now ending early, well early into the season, do you think that this means that it makes it the Jazz easier to retain him? Harder to retain him? What do you think this means where it comes to restricted free agency for Walker Kessler? Let me know that down below. With that said, last topic that I want to talk about today is Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid, yesterday the 76ers had a game against my Chicago Bulls in which they were up by 24 points at one point. They led that game for most of the first half by 18 to 20 points. The Bulls chipped away at it. They end up winning that game. And in the fourth quarter, Joel Embiid went 0 for 5. And there were times where Joel was isolated against Nikola Vucevic, and Vuce made him pick up his dribble, he stripped him one time, or just settled for bad shots. And Joel Embiid so far on this season is having the worst plus-minus of his NBA career. Say what you will about Joel Embiid and his injuries. He's been a plus-point differential every year of his career. This is the first year he's a negative point differential. The 76ers are worse by 17.5 points when Joel Embiid is on the court. And even with Joel Embiid's defense and rim protection, things that have really been a hallmark of him as an NBA player over his career, when he's on the court, opposing teams are scoring 14.9 points more per 100 possessions when Joel Embiid is on the court. His rebounding percentage is down. The block percentage is down. Everything is down. And as it stands right now, I get it that Joel is coming back from injury. Things aren't necessarily all set in. It's very early in the season. He could very well wake up from this sooner rather than later. But as things stand right now, Joel Embiid does not look good. Hell, Joel Embiid doesn't even look like a fraction of himself as it stands right now. It's bad. And I do think that eventually the 76ers are going to have to ask themselves a tough question. You're better without him on the court. But is it time to move on so you can let these players in Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, you just got Jerry McCain back yesterday, Quentin Grimes, who's probably not going to return due to being on a qualifying offer. He's averaging 18 points per game. But is it time to maybe start making some moves and some changes where you're looking at your long-term future? It's clear already Tyrese Maxey is their best player. It's clear already Tyrese Maxey is their leader. It's clear already Tyrese Maxey is probably the player you need to be building around going forward. And when you have a point guard as your best player, you don't necessarily need the more versatile centers. Like Adem Bana is probably going to be fine for them. We'll see, right? But that raises the question here. Now, the question that you also have to ask is, what even is Joel Embiid's value out on the open market, even if you were to shop him? And that's an answer that I don't have, a question I don't have the answer for, unfortunately. I do not know if teams even look at 31-year-old Joel Embiid, who's getting paid $55 million this year, $58 million after that, and then over $60 million the next 2 years on that. He doesn't even have a team option on the last deal. It's a player option. You're already dealing with Paul George on an over $50 million contract as well. What happens with Joel Embiid? That is a question that I am so interested in this because it's clear to me it's time to move on. Whether you move on in the sense that we just don't build this team around Embiid anymore, and when he's on the court, cool, we'll take it, or if it's in the sense that we need to get him out of here so these other players can flourish and we can finally move on and close this chapter and focus on these young guards and wings and things that we have here, and maybe that's what they need to do. I don't know. I don't have the answer, but the question is such an intriguing one because this is a former MVP. But between injuries and other things, it just does not seem like he's going to reach that level again. Now, I say this early. 7 games into the season, this could very well turn around, and for all we know, Joel Embiid could find the stride and find his health around midway part of the season, and it'd be good. But as it looks right now, it is a big question hanging over the head of the Philadelphia 76ers on what they need to do with Joel Embiid. So I'm going to turn this one over to you guys. What do you guys think the Sixers need to do with Joel Embiid? Is it time to completely move on from him? Is it okay to keep him around while you develop these other players? What would you do with Joel Embiid? I think it's such an interesting conversation to have because we know who Embiid has been, and we know what the reputation is there around Embiid. But the fact of the matter is, he just is not that guy anymore. Not remotely, not anywhere close to it. And he, like I said, actively hurting your basketball team. And if that continues, man, it's going to be a rough ride for Joel Embiid. And I just don't know if this thing is going to turn around sooner rather than later. I just don't know, man. I wish the story would be different. I wish there could be something that we could talk about differently, but that's what it is. But that's it for today's episode of NBA Central. The Ja Morant rumors are only going to grow from now on. The Jazz have some real questions to ask themselves in regards to Walker Kessler, and the 76ers need to decide on what the future is with or without Joel Embiid. But as always, I want to hear from you guys. Drop your thoughts down below in the comment section. Make sure you guys are following us at NBA Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. And I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.